Well, new year, same problems. And now we can see in the cold light of day the monumental task that is in fact ahead of Steven Gerrard, as I wish you a happy new year. And if you're looking to this show for some kind of silver lining in that game, you're not going to find it, because there are some realities we're going to have to revisit again, including recruitment in the summer and heading into recruitment during this January transfer window, which is now, of course, officially open. But we all just wanted to start 2022 on a positive winning note, and it did not happen. And although I've imbibed way too much during the holiday season, I've pulled out the Mort Latch, the wee witchy from Dufftown, a fine 12-year-old single malt, as we dissect. Brentford 2, Aston Villa 1. Welcome inside the parlor for the first time in 2022, and yes, the tree will be coming down after this show, which is very sad. I find this time of year very difficult. And what do we do to get ourselves out of the post-holiday winter doldrums? Why, we turn to football, of course, hoping our clubs will inspire us with brilliant play and victory upon victory. There's another way too, and that's through retail therapy. How do you like this version of The Villan from Football Town, a fine boutique bespoke company? Santa got it to me for Christmas. I'm 6'2", 250. This is an XL, and it fits like a glove. Reminds me of Dalian Atkinson. Rest his soul. And finally, apology issued. But if you want this or any shirt from Football Town, use the promo code Holy Trinity Show. They've extended it through the first part of January. Thank you for your purchases already, because they do help out this show. And happy retail therapy. And also, I wanted to send an apology to Anthony Horton from Wicklow Town, Ireland, the guy who won our Peter With print. I butchered the spelling of his name in our last show. I'm so embarrassed. That is easily a bookable offense. Instead of honorable mentions, I'm going to share some irritations with you. Like, what is the deal with Brentford and Aston Villa? Why can't we beat that outfit? They're more like a cult rather than a club. Any Premier League team that only gets a 1 out of 6 point return against a newly promoted side would be very disappointed. But Brentford has had Villa's number. You should have heard the guys on Corrupt FM going on about it afterwards. It was truly obnoxious. Then John McGinn picks up a useless yellow card for his 5th in the 89th minute mental lapse. And the irony is that Morgan Sanson came on for Jacob Ramsey because he was on a yellow card, I'm presuming, even though Ramsey was the liveliest of all of our midfielders, and I felt like he was likely the one to create a breakthrough. He comes out, McGinn stays on, and gets his 5th yellow card and now misses out against Manchester United in the league. And don't get me started on Trezeguet and the theatrics late in the game. He does the hard part, accelerates around the corner with the ball into the penalty area, and then goes for the theatrics. And because he already does have a little bit of a reputation among Premier League referees for the easy tumble, they weren't buying it, and it was a wasted opportunity. So that's now 2 games in a row where Villa have scored first, only to come away with absolutely nothing. And there was an interesting similarity with the game against Chelsea. The 2-1 Lukaku goal was preceded by a 17-pass Chelsea sequence where Villa kind of stood off, but then they found the ball and the head of Lukaku, and that ended up being the game winner. And in the Brentford game, prior to the 1-1 goal, the Bees had a 26-pass sequence where, again, Villa stood off, allowed them to have possession, and eventually they found their way through Villa, which is a bit disturbing because they say you rest in possession and you work out of it. And if that's the case, Villa's kind of asking for trouble a little bit there by just backing off. I thought that Steven Gerrard's style was going to be to put a bit more pressure on the ball, even if it is late in the half. All right, here we go with the Holy Trinity, the 3 big issues or moments that define Brentford 2, Villa 1, starting with the statistical story, which favored the visitors in almost every category, which is why this was such a frustrating, perplexing match to watch. Expected goals, not spectacular by either side, but Villa almost 2-1 in chances created, 5 of those by Emi Buendia. Pass success, not great for Villa either, but much better than Brentford, which is usually a decent passing outfit. Douglas Luiz with an 86% passing proficiency, the best among any player on the field. That's more successful passes in this game. than he's made on Alicia Lehmann. Possession, for only the third time this season, Villa outpossessed their opponents. The other two times, Watford away, 62%, and then Everton home, 56%. Villa also caught offside 4 times in that game, which was rather frustrating given the circumstances. So while those statistics may be viewed as a positive, we're not a process-oriented club like Brentford. They have completely different expectations of what they want from this Premier League season. They do it on a budget, and they measure a lot of their work in statistics, which can actually camouflage a bad result here and there. That's not the case with Aston Villa anymore. Not with the change of manager and the upheaval that it brought with people leaving, people coming in, people mingling in who were already there. Now that Steven Gerrard is here, we got to stop talking about moral victories, and we must start thinking about actual victories and having a sustained push up the table. I've said it numerous times on this show, I'm not a fan in sports of these instant gratification, quick fix coaching changes, which happen in all sports right now. To me, it's kind of like getting a booster. You get a shot in the arm, and all of a sudden there's a reaction for 7, maybe 8 games if you're lucky, but that will always wear off, that initial reaction. And what we should really be looking at is the true health and the construct of the squad. I'm not talking about fitness, I'm talking about the composition of the group. And it's easy for that layer above the head coach to make them the sacrificial lamb, which is a diversion from the recruitment that occurred previously. And I'm sorry, but we're now halfway through the season. At what point do we start asking the question about the summer recruits and whether they will be consistent over the long term and whether they actually fit into the systems and the philosophy of the new manager? And with Ings and Buendia, this game beautifully illustrated why they are so frustrating to watch at times. The inconsistency, which is a microcosm of Aston Villa as a whole this year. From one game to the next, from one half to the next, you never know what you're going to get. The good came about in the 15th minute. Buendia, what a turn, what improvisation, and then a beautifully weighted ball between defenders on a platter for Danny Ings. And what I marvel about with this goal is that never once does Danny Ings look up to see where the goal or the goalkeeper is. It's like it's forever permanently lasered in his brain. His focus was on the ball and the technique, which he got absolutely spot on. That was precisely what we all expected to see numerous times since the beginning of the season between Ings and Buendia. But that was Danny Ings' first goal since October 16th. And yes, there have been injuries, but he had 3 other bona fide chances in that game, too late especially, where he couldn't make the right connection. And what worries me about Ings is how lost he looks out of possession, like a headless chicken, whereas Ollie Watkins always seems to know where to be without the ball. And as for Emi Buendia, even though he created 5 chances in that game, and that's a positive, I still see too many times where he makes the wrong pass at the wrong time or looks feeble or clumsy on his feet and gives away possession, like in the 75th minute when he's easily dispossessed, which forces an absolutely amazing save out of Emi Martinez. Otherwise, it's 2-1 there. And when you put those two players together, that is a 60 million quid outlay. That's too much for what we've been getting out of those two. And if we want to carry on with that inconsistent theme, how about Bertrand Traore? I was a bit surprised he started, only because he's just not been involved for so long. But if ever there was a player who could in 1 minute take an absolutely sublime wizardry-like touch and then spectacularly give the ball away the very next, it's Bertrand Traore. Or how about when he just takes the ball on too far by himself rather than playing his teammates in, which happened a couple of times in that game? That's Traore. Same with Trezeguet. He does something wonderful 1 second and then catastrophic the next. Read final moments, drive into the penalty area and tumbling spectacularly. We as a football club must get out of the potentials and maybes and hopefuls because they operate in this price range. And we now need to move to the bona fide quality echelon, which is this price range. Number 3. no Watkins. And isn't it strange that both times this year when Brentford came around, Watkins was unavailable? I know he was injured at the beginning of the season, but this one was so random and unfortunate because players do like to take on their former sides, especially in a stadium that Watkins never got to play in with Brentford. And not to mention, you don't want to chop and change your squad all the time. And I know everybody is going through some form of this, but that front three needs to build up some cohesion and understanding among itself. And not to mention the fact that Ollie Watkins would have been intimately aware with how Brentford play out of the back, which as a pressing forward would have been a bit of an advantage. So he was a big miss in that game. Number 2, Hawes and Target mishaps. The 1-1 goal was a killer, just as conceding a penalty was versus Chelsea 5 minutes after taking the lead. When you concede a goal with less than 5 minutes to go before the halftime team talk, you give one team all the momentum and the manager has to throw out the script and start all over again, not to mention the fact that really, apart from that moment, the Bees offered very little in that first 45 minutes. In fact, the crowd was starting to get on them just prior to the sequence that led to the goal. And when you inspect the goal closely, both Matt Targett and Courtney Haas had a very big role to play in positioning. It wasn't right. They were both kind of rolled. They didn't really commit a foul or to challenge the ball, and they didn't back off to at least block off the goal or the channel of play. And it ends up in the back of their goal. Take nothing away from the finish because it was superb, but it was all so avoidable and it looked all so easy. So thinking about that 1-1 instant, Matt Targett has a decision to make. He is touch tight. Does he make a tackle and commit there, or does he drop off and hold his position? But the ball played through him like he was a hologram, and bless Matt Targett. His drop-off from last year is incredible, and I know he benefited greatly from having Jack Grealish on his side of the field. But I'm just wondering what's happening in his mind with all this talk about a very public search for a new left back. And then Courtney Haas commits the same kind of errors as Targett does. He's neither close enough to make a tackle or in the position to block a shot or block off the goal. It's like the same mistake is made twice, and Villa is so easily played around. It's 1-1, and that is the goal that changes the game again. And the number one big issue or moment that defined Brentford 2, Villa 1, Haas, Targett, mishaps. Game-winning goal. Another great example of how those two players did not seem comfortable under the circumstances of knowing what to do, starting with Courtney Haas, who failed to deal with that first ball into the penalty area, which is where maybe we did miss Tyrone Mings and a decisive clearance at that moment. And I agree that after the ball was bobbling around, it was probably wise for Haas to not go chasing after it and dive in the penalty area, because that's playing with fire. But at the same time that was happening, Matt Targett decides to tuck infield, thus leaving the eventual goal scorer wide open on Brentford's right-hand side. And if you're going to give the same guy 2 bites of the cherry from that range, you're asking for trouble. And you'll also notice that both Haas and Targett went flying in, overcommitted. Earlier in Gerrard's first games, everybody was keeping their feet. They were keeping disciplined. And that made it harder for guys to get shots through on the Villa goal, because that's what you do. But when you commit and you go diving in, that's an invitation for the player to shoot. Plus, it makes it harder for the goalkeeper to see. And whether that was through tiredness or desperation, I don't know. But that's a goal that, again, was so avoidable on so many fronts. It's just so blatantly obvious for me and probably anyone looking in at Villa where the priorities lie during this recruitment window. And one of those positions is left back, and we've heard that publicly. But now it's clearly center back with Axel Tuanzebe's departure for Napoli, which expedites the search for a center back. And it's not Tuanzebe that Villa needs to upgrade on, it's Tyrone Mings. And that's a $30 to $50 million player, probably at the very least, unless you're finding some kind of diamond in the rough gem that nobody's ever heard of. But this club needs to stop talking about ambition unless they're willing to outlay for those kinds of players, those big players, impact players. They got their managerial booster, but the only way we're progressing from here on in is through really good recruitment. And by the way, with Axel Tuanzebe's departure, that is a big ask for him going to Napoli, a very demanding footballing market. And to be honest with you, it takes a problem off Villa's hands, because if they were guaranteeing him minutes, that's a problem, because I was not impressed with his performances this season. And not a whole lot to update in our subcategories, except that Danny Ings' goal makes it 9 in the Watkins-Ings combined goals tally, which means they're on pace for just 18 over the course of the season. Everything else stays pretty much the same, except for an away record that is now 9 points out of a possible 30. Brentford manager Thomas Frank even said after the game, "I cannot believe our club just leapfrogged Villa in the table halfway through the season, given how much Villa has spent on recruitment over the last couple of years," which sounded suspiciously like a backhanded stab at the club, given that they let go his friend and former colleague Dean Smith for performances which were eerily reminiscent of this one. And now it's a league and cup double dip with Manchester United. Hopefully everybody's back and healthy soon. And let's see how soon before Johan Lange and company dip into the transfer market. If they do, they're going to need to. Let's put it that way. Until that time, stay well, stay healthy, and up the mighty Villa.